Okay, so we all live by laws, right? They shape pretty much everything. Our society, our rights, our responsibilities. But have you ever actually stopped and asked yourself, what is law?
You know, that one single question, it has sparked centuries of just fierce debate among the world's greatest legal thinkers. And look, it's a question with no easy answer, for sure. But exploring it, it reveals so much about how our world works. So, okay, let's dive right in.
I mean, the search for an answer here, it takes us all the way through ancient Rome, medieval theology, and even into the really intense intellectual battles of the 20th century. The thing is, to really get a handle on the legal and political arguments that are happening today, you've got to understand the competing answers to this super fundamental question.
All right, so the great debate really kicks off with two absolute titans of legal philosophy, natural law and legal positivism. And these two, they represent two fundamentally different ways of thinking about what gives a law its authority in the first place.
Okay, so this really lays the core conflict bare, right? On one side, you've got the natural law tradition. They argue that for a rule to even be considered law, it has to be moral. So if a rule is just profoundly unjust, well, then it's not a law at all. Simple as that. But then on the other hand, you have legal positivism. They insist that law is just a social fact. A law is a law if it's made through the right procedures, period. Doesn't matter if we think it's good or bad.
And this idea, which the Roman orator Cicero put so beautifully, is really the heart of natural law. Its supporters argue that real law isn't just something we make up, it's something we discover. They believe it's rooted in something universal and timeless. You know, things like human reason, nature itself, or even divine will. But the positivists? Oh, they pushed back, and they pushed back hard. They wanted to create a pure science of law, something totally stripped of all those messy moral judgments. For them, the law isn't about what it ought to be, but simply what it is. A system you can analyze objectively, not some moral code you have to revere.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the 20th century. This classic debate gets completely redefined. It becomes this incredible intellectual duel between two philosophical giants, H.L.A. Hart and Ronald Dworkin. And this wasn't just them rehashing the same old arguments. No, this was a fundamental shift in the entire conversation.
So first up is H.L.A. Hart. He was this brilliant positivist, and he seriously refined the argument. He looked at the old model, law is just a command from a ruler, and said, that's way too crude. It's not that simple. Instead, he proposed that law is way better understood as a really complex system of rules. And this was Hart's big insight. A legal system is really a union of these two types of rules. You've got the primary rules that guide our behavior, sure, but it's the secondary rules, the rules about how to pass new laws or how courts make decisions, that give a legal system its structure, its ability to adapt, and ultimately, its authority. And that is the exact question that just blew the door wide open for Hart's greatest challenger, Ronald Dworkin. Dworkin looked at what are called hard cases. The ones where the existing rules are kind of vague or just don't seem to apply. And he had a totally different idea about what was really going on.
And here's where you can really see the tension. For Hart, when you run out of rules, that's where a judge's discretion kicks in. But for Dworkin, no way. He said the principles are always there, under the surface. Judges aren't just inventing answers out of thin air. They are interpreting the law to find the one single right answer.
But hold on, this isn't just a two-sided boxing match between positivists and natural law folks. Later in the 20th century, other powerful theories jumped into the ring, and they started challenging the very foundations of the whole discussion, asking totally different kinds of questions.
Yeah, the debate was definitely not a two-way street anymore. These new schools of thought, like critical legal studies and feminist jurisprudence, they showed up. And they weren't just interested in defining what law is. They wanted to question its supposed neutrality. They started asking a really powerful new question. Whose law are we talking about anyway?
And these new challengers, they force us to confront some pretty uncomfortable questions. Critical legal studies, for example, argues that law isn't some neutral referee. It's actually a tool used to keep existing power structures in place. Then you have feminist jurisprudence, which exposes how a system built mostly by men can't help but reflect and reinforce patriarchal values.
And simmering underneath all of that is an even more basic debate. Should we be analyzing law philosophically or studying it empirically like a science? All these critiques really demand that we look past the written rules and ask, who does the law really serve?
You know, this complexity isn't just about politics or power. It's literally baked into the very language of law. Let's take a fascinating concept that H.L.A. Hart himself explored, something called defeasibility. This is the core idea right here. Almost every single rule has a kind of built-in unless clause. It's a list of potential exceptions that you could never possibly spell out completely in advance. This means the rules are always open to being, well, defeated by new, unforeseen circumstances. And this built-in fuzziness isn't just some abstract puzzle for philosophers. It has huge effects in the real world.
So, okay, what's the point of all this theory? Why should you care about some centuries-old philosophical debate? Well, here's why. Because these ideas aren't just sitting in textbooks. They are actively shaping the laws that govern our lives, right now, today.
Let's take something from the cutting edge of science. A legal positivist. They might look at our genetic information as just another fact, something to be regulated by whatever rules society happens to agree on. But a natural law theorist? They might argue that we have an inherent right to dignity and privacy over our own biological code, a right that goes beyond any man-made law and can't just be voted away for the public good. See? Their answers to the exact same problem are worlds apart.
See, understanding this great debate gives you a powerful new lens to see the world through. You now have a toolkit to decode the arguments you hear every day. You can question the power behind our laws, and you can analyze the biggest legal debates of our time with a much, much deeper level of understanding.
So in the end, the question, what is law, it doesn't have a final answer. It can't. It's a living, breathing conversation that's always evolving right along with our society. And the most important thing to take away is this. By understanding the debate, you're not just a spectator anymore. You're a part of the conversation.